Northern Trosata, Ngaro double, Northern Trosata, the region North social still. Tato church, Tato Koro Churchill, the Churchill Kone. Tato says Korosha, Sajit Kaka, Tato to Roselusha, Sajit Tea, the Sajit Chechu, Tayat, what did you say, Dune, Tato Thursday, Tato Thursday, the Shekoro Tajelo, T. Samare, Tatility, Tato Jared Sibit, Tato Stashi to chair of it, Tombo Tong, Yesit, Nimbo, Dande, they load the Kermugoati. My touches of the Stashi Roche Tombo Noto, the Sinimo, no to the short on Nibatan of Palden, Nibatan of Suron, what taken it. Tashi teacher of the Tombo Cabando, Tsukarare, Lessinimo Tsukarare, Tsutotinomat, Tasi to Tinonas, Nimbo, Tasai to Tilas, Tasai to Tilas, no the Tasai Tatoshi, Tas in the Carreras and Dazel Stene, Ani Tachu, Cosa to Tower. Until top sopan of the world. Oh, tea, Tasai to say. Only lashing your mono tapito say, you're Tassi to say, Pache tapito, the Yiki Matama Mandro social gendo, the Chebacha. Tasai to the sheet, service.
First of all, the next thing is we have the in English. There are 2 pages, which Rinpoche later added to the main book, and I did the translation and helped by the principal of the Dalai College, Professor Kaveri Gilji, to edit it. So this is available in English. And at the advice of Rinpoche, the main text, very short text, is about like the original one has about like 1 page. Later, Rinpoche also advised me to add the respective quotes, and then now we have about like almost like 2 pages. This will be available to be downloaded for the viewers. And the topic is Inquiry into the Object of Imputation. And so I'm now paraphrasing Rinpoche. It's not my voice. This is a extremely challenging topic, and I'd like to share my thoughts on this. And I personally would say that it has been the topic where I was a little confused, and this is where I really delved into analysis to see what it actually means, or pertaining to inquiry into the object of imputation. Let's say that object is imputed by your mind, and then we speak about you inquiring into, you are searching for the object of imputation. So here, when we fail to identify what the object of imputation is, well, then you are bound to suffer, not to understand the emptiness properly. So in this connection, this becomes a very important thing. So what is being said here is that inquiry, this one part, into the object of imputation. That is number 2. So oftentimes people confuse between these 2 things. Let's say that the self, and self is the basis and its characteristics. So what is imputed is the object, and then you are inquiring something else, not what is imputed, that object per se. This is not what you are inquiring. You are just inquiring something else on the basis of what is already imputed, the basis. So When you mix up the two things, what is imputed and what you are searching, what are you inquiring, on top of this, what is imputed, when you mix up these two things, then you can go wrong in your identified object negation, thus failing to understand emptiness properly. So, the point is that when we speak about the inquiry into the object of imputation, that becomes the basis, and what you inquire is the characteristic. That what you're inquiring should be the characteristics, one of the characteristics or the attributes of the basis. So we have to demarcate between these two things, the object of imputation and then what you inquire. So what is being inquired and inquired on the basis of the object of imputation. These two should be segregated. In this connection, just for information, that what Rinpoche is using in his hand, that consisted of only the abbreviated version, and then at the advice of Rinpoche, I added all these quotes, and also there's one small paragraph added in the beginning, and this also I'm going to read for the English readers. So the total, in other words, so what I have here in my hand, this is from Rinpoche's the thoughts. So I'm going to read this. It says, there are two ways of inquiring and investigating the object to be analyzed: the way followed by the person who is not influenced by philosophy, and the way followed by the person influenced by philosophy. The first one is akin to the analysis carried out in the courts and so forth. For example, say that the conventional analysis, where people look for witnesses and so forth. So we do inquiry. So that is a conventional analysis. Second one constitutes where the analysis done influenced by the philosophy. The second one constitutes analyzing the object of imputation imputed by the dependence on the basis of designation. So this is the part that we're discussing here, on the basis of the what you are inquiring on the basis of the basis of designation, and to identify the object of negation well. And it reads there, and when we speak about the object of imputation, so there's a word imputed. So impute of course has three, the tenses, the past, present, future. So that imputed, that is the past. So the inquiry into the characteristic of the object which is imputed. So that becomes the basis of basis. On this basis, you are looking for, you are inquiring for the characteristic. So what is that characteristic? This is the point. Sometimes just as many people mistake this, the inquiry into object of imputation, they think that they're actually inquiring into what the object of imputation is. So this is wrong, and it's some texts also you do find the wordings that the objects which is imputed. So if that's the case, then for sure it should be typo. So now for the analysis, let's say that Tashi as a person by the name Tashi. When you go in search of this person Tashi, and where is Tashi? When you say this is purely conventional analysis. This is not the analysis that we are talking about here. And then the end of the way is that when you look for the imputation per se, there are two things: the imputing the object to be that, and the imputing an object on the basis of that. There are two things. For example, let's say you see a snake, and you say, oh, there's a snake there. So this snake, you impute on the basis of the snake there. What is a snake lying there? You impute the snake. So this is imputing an object, which imputing, the imputation is done on the basis of what the object is. The snake is the snake, or that creature which is slithering through, that is snake. So that is imputed as a snake. So that imputation is what we call imputing the object on the object which is what is imputed. which is what is imputed. This is also not what we are the inquiring here. So now what we are inquiring is related to the say when you're looking for Tashi, you see Tashi's face. So once you touch his face, you don't think that Tashi's face is Tashi. So, but you impute, oh, there's a Tashi there. You impute Tashi on the basis of the Tashi's face and the other aggregates. So you are not actually imputing Tashi on the basis of these aggregates to be the Tashi. But these bases are used as a factors dependent upon which Tashi is imputed. So the Tashi is imputed not to be given the impression that the face and so forth are Tashi. Rather, they serve as a basis by which the Tashi is imputed. So there we see that the basis of destination and what is designated, there are two things. So the basis of destination, what is designated, these two are to be seen as of the same entity, but otherwise different, and these should be mutually different, which means that Tashi cannot be the basis of his own destination, nor the basis of his own destination should be Tashi. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. So with this in mind, continue reading from the text. It reads, as for what the object of imputation is, in the context of inquiring into the object of imputation, it is said in the Ocean Reasoning. Lama Tsongkhapa, the great commentary in Arya Nagarjuna's Fundamental Wisdom Middle Way, apprehending the object of negation is apprehending the producer and produced as existing from the object to which the label is designated. So the object, and then the object as the basis of destination, and the label is designated on that, as opposed to the cause and effect as merely designated with label. In the Essence of Eloquent Speech by Lama Tsongkhapa, it says, if the object do exist with self-characteristics, the analyzing mind must find them. When one analyzes the referent object of the designated label produced, to see if the sprout is produced from seed which is intrinsically different or intrinsically one with the sprout.
Kosachi Tao Dazi Yela Otomba or Tati Yela Chashi Pumbai Chashi Tele Yor Nembapo or T Da says the color only Casisho and Ozi Tishin also and the two. Correct, said the color. Crashy say at you, took under it, and with the color. Teachers automata, tiny coteton, subject your land on Chalachi land on the Timara. That didn't me, Masotin of Trashy say at the color around, and there is a Dadio to color. Trashy Pombote or Tombati or teacher. Antene Drury in a coral Yemba Tower. Tandatale Tini Das, Dombata Trashires, Samumaria, Domba, newer linked. Drury in it, a coral newer lembas, Connie does it to touch it to you, more cheat or trash it to Dasi Samare, to tell a Tini, tell it down here on. Does it say at Coro Dashi to newer lembapo. Newer lembapo say at the Corobe, Ndra, Dashi to Ndra, more shit and Drayon Kisti, oh, roll shan. There is down to color. Then Dazil, ten, tower, then the trashy thoughts on it. That is trashy thoughts, trashy teller. Chebacheni, Chokane, one, Cholichi, Chokaban, Nikakari, Kitchati, Chite Tanya, and Koga, Ko, that's it, or call it to set. The penny one, the children, just steal, the kakare. That time the Lolo Sherry always see, Trashy Koro, Tiny, the Yonka, Trashy, Chish, Dole Kosa, you get Trashy, Lolo Stisha Yung. Tinyam Della, Rongini Yoba. Romani Yoba young Yona Chitu Womata sharing. Rochi Tapa, Mala Rochi Tapa, State Rochi Tonki. Oh, the dark so you. That's you to call that what they call that Dagi Cholika carries teacher, the tiny dictate tiny teacher. Tandan Diga, Tawa Kolka, that's what they call it. That trashy, the Dombat and Church, Tin, that Lola said, that trashy, Caballo, Nolo to Cholo to combat to Labad, Nolo cutter, said, only on the trusted the more Tatiba, trusted more Chiba, trusted Anisian. Anile the more tatted the wood will talk about uses dinner, no motor tonkin about you. What I tell it, and the Kashika Jew Pumbo with Jundered, Kashika Topater, Kashika and Nashi, Kasher, the township, and then it Kozo, Tatanda de Olma, and did something of just Kozo to Tassel. Oh yeah, that thing ma ke what ma ta te yo da daje yela taxi yo member kola go.
So in this connection, the in both the text cited earlier, ocean reasoning by Lama Tsongkhapa as well as the eloquent speech. In both cases, it says that to the object of designation. So what does it mean by that? When we see, say, Tashi, the man by the name Tashi, if you ask, who are you? Where do you come from? And so forth. These are all the conventional analysis. This is not the kind of analysis that we are, the incurring here. And then the the text reads, since both the texts quoted above said to the object of designation, it is implied to the basis of the characteristics. So what is imputed as the basis of designation, and they say the basis, the object on which the things are imputed, that object serves as the basis, and now what you're inquiring is the characteristic which is designated on the basis of that object of the basis of designation. So it says, more precisely, it should refer to the appropriator of the basis of the designation, such as the limbs and the parts. Now, for this, the analysis, again, from what we did earlier, one is the seeing this person by the name Tashi. You inquire where do you come from, what's your name, and so forth. So this all fall in the category of the conventional analysis. Whereas when Tashi appears to a mind, what happens is that the Tashi appears, Tashi as a person which exists appears to your mind, and then Tashi to be intrinsically real, that Tashi existing from its own side, it also appears to you. And then they say the Tashi to be existing as a self-supporting entity, as a self-sustained, self-supporting entity, it appears to you. So there we see that the Tashi which, as a person which exists, it appears, and appears simultaneously, and the Tashi to be existing with the self-support, as self-supporting entity, or existing as intrinsically real. So these two along with the Tashi be existing as a person. These two appear as like mixed, as well like this the same, as mixed. The way and the manner the milk and the water, when they are mixed, you cannot really distinguish the two. Likewise, this is how these two things appear to mind. And so keeping this in mind, that how these two things appear to mind, when you see that this Tashi, which appears to be intrinsically the existent from its own side, so this intrinsic existent or self-supporting Tashi, where is he? So then when you try to analyze this Tashi, whether Tashi exists outside the aggregates, inside the body, and so forth, one, and then whether this Tashi exists with his limbs, the feet, arms, and so forth. And these are not really the analysis of the ultimate analysis. And in other words, within this analysis, we see that there are two kinds of analysis. One, where you are analyzing if the Tashi can be identified as one of these things like the external to the aggregates, or the aggregates themselves, or the limbs, or the arms, and so forth. Seeing if Tashi is to be identified as one with these parts, or Tashi should be identified as different from these parts, whether it exists outside the aggregates and so forth, as well as it is existing different from these. So there are two analyses.
Dicena de pentate yosiba chibi tikete dan dika lontato di stashitujino kabali yo di tele kibi di teda nahita.
So when searching for this the person, the Tashi, there are various philosophers who come up with different the standpoints. One saying that there's this person as a driver of the whole thing, of all the aggregates, something residing inside these aggregates, and some say that it's a continuum of the aggregates, that is this the person Tashi, and some say that the collection of the aggregates is Tashi, and some say the mental consciousness, that is the Tashi. And so a more detailed explanation will be done as we read the text. And the text reads, from what we read before, I'll read this again. Since both the texts quoted above said to the object of designation, it is implied to the basis of characteristics. More precisely, it should refer to the appropriator of the basis of the destination, such as the limbs and the parts. And what is searched for under examination are things such as gross objects and the continuum, for it says in Madhyamagavatar, the possessor of the continuum exists in that they are mutually different. In the commentary illuminating the true intention, Lama Tsongkhapa says, okay, so here we are talking about it says here that the appropriator, as for the analogy given of the vase, it says that that more precisely it should refer to the appropriator of the basis of the destination, such as the limbs and the parts. When we look for the vase has many parts, like the neck, the rim, the bulbous body, and so forth. And so we see that when you speak of the vase is not identified as any of these parts there. Rather, it should be viewed as the appropriator of these parts. So what is appropriated and what appropriates the appropriator? And in this connection, the appropriator, it should be seen as like the one which pervades to all what appropriated, and what is like the agent, or it should be like the appropriator of the parts. appropriate parts, the vast as the appropriate. That's the meaning of the appropriate. The parts and the whole as the appropriator of the parts. This is what should be understood when we read that as the how you identify the self, how you identify the vast. So, according to unique presentation of Prasangika, it should be the appropriator, which is the designated on the basis of the things that are appropriated or things that are the base of destination.
China, Pamba, Pambim Cheton, Jambala, Soba, Yor, Nemba, Pora, Yimba, Nugenda, Genda, Tanjeri, Pamba Shons, and Otara, Pambim Cheton, Kato, Newer Lemba Botus, there were newer Lemba Boys at Pamba Shamdra Boto, a street shot, Tato Mayimba, Koroka Tashi, Cheto, or 티 티그 제바보 잡고 첩진 잡고 어때 들어 그 차치 되니 연락해도 차시지 제보 되니 제보 시타 신조니에선 로안으로 뛰라고래 뭐니 차시제도 차지 지금 뭐래 집이 태 나시도 뭐 Génon, Dieu, c'est ta Dieu, c'est tout. Te rapporte, Dieu, si tu travailles, tu sens qui n'y a pas pour la job à ton. Dieu, c'est, Dieu, c'est, tu sens, que tu m'as, tu sens les chanquets, tu sens les chanquets, tu le charbon. What is other duty tot? Then a lot of dawa tot and the social is about social by chunking your level. What is out there? No, gentlemen, Geshe to some the newer lemba pola is about Joseph. Then Dango causes. Dango causes. Then a causa and Jacques de Canada di Javiores and Delita, Tutamawa to Tanjeva to Dango, Goza Jato to Carriage Javiores. Living short in Japan, the Goza in Josenas, Shibanis, or that is a logo. That you know. Come on. Ninchote Jaba, Magi Tamatan Hondo. Ninchote Jaba, the Goza in Josenas. Kumboli mo tadebi ali keba po tani to yum ote chorobaga tisha takadi is no mota tonke no shetiba mota ko chala to so to mo tati ke no ka kalu jor de ke yake baje goshi pa ote ko mo chayon ke to no to stapa yi tene chame tene sa ote tene koza rongcha tabi jiyo to trapase ya koza ote rongcha tawse ya rongcha tawle to tata rongcha tawse ya kakare te rongcha tawse ya to chashi tuto to ngo tade ba ote cholo orjor denke cho ote tate ngo tade ba jeba bo tani te yo Tanya to you, Lega Maras. Tanya to little Jeba Kilo, Tanya Kilo. Deum, do chaman and do nitroin. No chaman so because send Ligi Jebabu and Kozaki, Nippon dog gobi, Teos, your longer to your son in Manjabo. Tidagi, or Pumboy and Ghetto, Anne Totoko, you were never book some. You were not like some, take of some care woman, whom go through the year. Only some Namaja said the Pumboko Ghetto, Topato, 아니 또요 뭐샤바 아니 디타게 녀를 레바 보샤바는 신들레 바이 고자죠 다시샤 다다시 가르르에서 어디 다다게 다다시 때 어디 거를 어떻게 뒤에서 지요라 특별히 뜻에서 다 뜻에서 그저 뜻에서 다시 통신的다 고들에도 공화들에도 놀러요도 출로요도 스니들에도 견들에도 낚시들에도 다 낚시들에 생각해서 좋다 뭐 못중으로 어떻게 낚시되어 많이 받을 때 녀를 롱자라면 녀를 내가고 말해 고사가 녀를 이렇게 자기 낚시 코로가 차실 때니 코로요 녀를 내가보래 낚시 고사가 녀를 롱자라면 녀를 내가고 말해 어제 저기 처벌지요 매조서
Continuation from the text, it reads, since the substantial, so that is from Lama Tsongkhapa's illuminating the true intention, it says, since the substantial moments which are the parts of the continuum have the continuum, the substantial moments which are the parts of the continuum are referred to as the continuum appropriators. As the parts and the limbs of the continuum are possessed by the continuum, the whole, the continuum is referred to as the appropriate of those parts. For example, it is akin to vase being the appropriate of the rim, the neck, and so forth of the vase, which I read before. And it says that I think the meaning is well reflected from the fact that the continuum is posited as the appropriator of the three times. So, just as we explained this to the vase in terms of the continuum. So when you speak about the continuum, a temporal continuum, let's say that the continuum time in the form of the continuum or the continuum in temporal sense, it should have the three components: the past, present, and the future. The three moments: the past, present, future, and then with these three moments there as the parts or the basis of designation, then the continuum which spreads or which pervades along these three moments of time is referred to as the continuum. For example, a month or a year. Say a month is constituted of 30 days or 31 days, and these individual days, 30 days, they form the basis of the designation of the continuum. What is continuum? The continuum of, in temporal sense, as a month, that is what pervades across the 30 days. So the continuum is what is designated on the basis of these individual 30 days as basis of designation. So it says, the text reads that, I think the meaning is well reflected from the fact that the continuum is posited as the appropriator of the three times, and also in the section rejecting inherent self. Okay, so this is going to be continued later. A reading from the text. The mode, the same from where we left last time. The mode of positing the self by the most excellent system, Sankara, is, since there exists no agent different from the aggregates, even on the conventional level, so which rejects the self to be believed as an autonomous sufficient entity, something different from the aggregates. So that is rejected. And then the text continues reading, and that one has to invariably accept the self as the agent of karma, when conventionally accepting karma and its ripening effects is indicated in the latter sutra, positing an appropriator of that karma, but not as one amongst the appropriated, is greatly admirable. So in this connection, the self being rejected to be intrinsically real, self to be rejected as the different from the aggregates, and yet you have to account for the self. That self does exist, which engages in the act of which engages in all these emotions, creating the karmas and so forth. And we have to account for such self. How do we establish this? So, when the manner in which the Prasanga establishes self, positive self, by not accepting any of these two possibilities, that is the supreme way of positing the self. In this connection, when you look for the self, as indicated here, that what is rejected is that the self is not posited as different from the aggregates, nor to be identified within its own aggregates, such as the continuum of the aggregates, or the collection of the aggregates, or the consciousness to be the aggregate, and so forth. And of course, there are many traditions or philosophical traditions who believe in this consciousness, mental consciousness, to be the self, and they see this consciousness to be the appropriator of the aggregates, and they equate this consciousness with the self. So there, the Prasangika would argue that the consciousness is not the appropriator because it is appropriated by the self. So, but we have to keep in mind that the consciousness per se, consciousness, it has its own parts, smaller, the temporal segments, and these, with respect to these parts, the consciousness, which is the whole, the consciousness in the form of the whole, with respect to its smaller parts or the temporal parts, that whole is the appropriator of these parts, but that consciousness as a whole is not the appropriator with respect to in the context of positing the self. So the self is appropriator, and the consciousness is appropriated, just as the continuum of the aggregates, collection, they are appropriated, not appropriator. Likewise, the consciousness is not appropriator, it is appropriated. And keep in mind that consciousness is appropriator with respect to its own parts, because that is a whole, and by dependence on the smaller temporal parts of the consciousness. So this is what we need to keep in mind.
Jibani Titana, your Liverpool, Shindo Neba, what that she Tinimati Tato, Chazit, that church, the current Tato Telujano, Koza Telujano, Tasatala, Anisha wounded, Jipper. Tinito, Gitito, Shibi, Shibani, and Shipper, Toto, Kozoto, Tanisha, T. Longton Dinoma, Sebio. Only Tinito, Gitito, Toto. Tinite toto gitete corzoto tanda corzoto tere corzoto trashika hakwacha trashika anashita reto trashika pombongo gendo reto corzoto tere trashika tato corzo trashik korote mote korola korote lucio koro toshende tanda only correct. Oh yeah, Theo Jean de Tsudi Chini. Jean Toton Tsudi Chini. Toto Tata So Chiti. Ensemble Monchis. And then Jean de Nolata. So Tsudi le Toto Tata, the Kazota Sayugan, Toto Tata, so Chini. Take a two-dit in the Tato, the Mochua, Toto, the Koya, Momboyo, the Diana, the Kozota, the Yoris, Moshis, Tini, Kozot, Tatsus, Chivana, Takozota, the Chena, Carresena, or Nobayoris, Toto, the Kozot, the Nobati. Sita yala sita yemet tawala jobar jobis or the kazu test sita yala sita yala sita are koluti sita are ani soxita sita are ani kon tani pombin cheta pombare pombisho te pombare te what the kazu test are ngani kumba tam thoshen da odongba tashi thoshen da odongba to tashi ere tik koba no go sni da no shi da to kozo to to ani jobi shita me par ko java to oh yeah tatini godere to yela shita la to Corlotoreto, Soshitoreto, Catereto, Oma Dangono, Corzoto Tessato. Tenishita, meva chango. Meva chango di cola. Teni, Cassi Lauricimbo, Totono, Tienke Coro Yum, Meto, Wanyamka, Tienke to your Mebacha. Teo to continue, Yuba, my Tonyelaki. Kashiko and Tonyola TV to that Taron, Kakayo, Meba, Solo Tongo. Then she Jala is the Kazokalisores. Tonyola Tiana Kakayo, Meba, what Tino Droshaga, the Kazoto Theatre, Tonyola Theatre, Omal, Solo Tony, Manju, Meba Geratos.
The text reads, as for inquiring into the object of imputation, which is the basis of characteristics, when entry into the middle way, by Acharya Chandrakirti says, although it does not exist through the seven modes, both in itself or in the world, both in itself, it refers to the ultimate. In the ultimate analysis, the chariot does not exist in the seven modes. Likewise, in the conventional analysis, both in itself or in the world. World here is the conventional. In the conventional analysis as well, if the chariot is searched in the seven modes, it will not be found. So from this, what we learn is that there are two modes of inquiry into the inquiry into the object of imputation. And Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary reads, commentary by Lama Tsongkhapa says, when the chariot is investigated in the seven modes, both in itself referring to the ultimate or in the worldly convention, no wonder a chariot can be established. There are two levels, ultimate and conventional, with which to examine the object of imputation. In the treatises, for the purpose of abbreviation, one finds more of the analysis done primarily on the ultimate level. So as indicated here, that when you go into the inquiry, into the object of analysis, there are two ways of doing it. One on the ultimate level, and the other on the conventional level. In other words, conventional analysis of the object of the imputation, and the ultimate analysis of the object of imputation. Again, the reiterating what is said earlier, Tashi, for example, say after seeing Tashi and looking for Tashi, whether he exists to be identified as the mental consciousness, or say the continuum of his aggregates. It is like looking for Tashi on top of Tashi itself. So this is not this falls in the category of the conventional analysis, not the ultimate analysis. And where in the treatises on explaining emptiness, we do find more commonly of the ultimate analysis of the ultimate analysis of the object of the imputation. But it is not that there is no conventional analysis pertaining to inquiry into the object of imputation. So both are there, but in the treatises you see that the one done on the basis of the ultimate analysis that is more commonly available. So likewise, let's say that for example, the chariot. If you look for the chariot, whether the wheel of the chariot is the chariot, or whether any part of the chariot is a chariot, and this falls under the conventional analysis. Likewise, the vase, if the rim of the vase is the vase, or the bulbous body of the vase is vase, the base of the vase is vase, and this analysis also falls in the category of the conventional analysis. In other words, if you look for the object, the whole or the appropriator, to be identified as one of these parts or different from the parts, these fall under the category of the conventional analysis. So, in this connection, continuing from where we read it again, it says that there are two levels, ultimate and conventional, with which to examine the object of imputation. In the treatises, for the purpose of abbreviation, one finds more of the analysis done primarily on the ultimate level. Whereas from the point of view of examining the object of imputation on the conventional level, it should be understood as being to merely analyze whether or not the parts of the chariot are indeed the chariot. This leads to the conclusion of the absence of chariot. This is very clearly stated in both extensive and abridged version of Lamrim to be the easiest thing to come to one's mind. So going back to the same point about the person by the name Tashi, when we look for that, after seeing Tashi and then still trying to identify the Tashi as one of his parts, like the heart and so forth, it falls in the category of the conventional analysis. Likewise for the chariot, looking for the chariot to be identified as the wheel, the herb, and so forth, they all fall in the category of the conventional analysis. And that in the process of this analysis, we see that to see that whether or not the parts are the chariot, you say that no, these are not the chariot, and then you see that chariot disappears. So the chariot is non-existent. It is on this basis, because of this misconception, because of this error, people end up into that some of the people who say that when you meditate emptiness, nothing exists, everything must dissolve, and then you should think that nothing really exists. So that is in the domain of the meditative emptiness. And whereas, what about these then? The objects of utility, what are they? So these are from the point of the convention. So they don't really exist. And from the point of convention, yes, we say that these things exist, but in the meditative emptiness, nothing exists. So this is where the error seeps in. So, as indicated in the great treatise on the stages of part enlightenment, Lamrim Chemo, and the shorter version of that, in both cases, it very clearly indicated that such understanding of emptiness, if you adhere to such the understanding to be the understanding of emptiness, this is easiest. This doesn't really connote the understanding of emptiness. And in fact, all these inquiry for me started when Dorji Damdul, when he was once in Dehradun, giving teaching on emptiness to many students, like 300, 400, 500 students. And at the end of his lecture, a young boy stood up and said that on the one hand, it says that emptiness is a very difficult topic. On the other hand, say the book is nowhere to be found. None of the leaf of the book is a book. So that is so easy. So what makes us think that emptiness is so difficult? This is a question that was brought up, raised by this young man to Dorji Damdul, and then he was sharing this with me on the phone, and then everything started from there. So that's very true that later on we come to discover that in both the treatises of Lamrim, the great treatise of the stages of modern enlightenment, and the shorter version in both, Lama Tsongkhapa very clearly indicated that such an analysis is not in the proper track. So this is erroneous. And in this connection, what we need to know is that the inquiry, when you engage in the inquiry into the object of imputation, we should keep in mind that it is of two kinds. One, the inquiry to be done on the conventional level, and the other on the ultimate level. So thus far, whatever we discuss is all on the analysis, conventional analysis, related to the inquiry into the object of imputation. Whereas then the question is, then what constitutes the inquiry, the ultimate analysis of the inquiry into the object of imputation? So there, we should be actually looking for the intrinsic self. We should be actually looking for the self-supporting self. So now what should that analysis be? As ultimate analysis. So there we should be looking for the intrinsic self. We should be looking for whether or not this intrinsic self exists, whether or not this self-supporting the self exists. When a self appears, it invariably appears as intrinsic or as self-supporting. And for me, personally, of the two words, the self-supporting, and that seems to resonate more with my. For me, it resonates more. I'm sick, and it's my personal experience. I'm sick, and I'm lying on my bed, sitting up, and when I'm just sitting there on the bed, I feel as though like I'm perfectly self-supporting, which means that I'm not ill, I'm not sick. And then because of this, I just feel like, okay, I want to get that which is lying a little further away. And then I go to I try to get up to take this thing, and then instantly I realize I cannot get up. I have the physical problem. I cannot get up. Then I realize that I'm not a self-supporting entity. So in this connection, let's say there's a sick person who is being supported by two helpers. The sick person would have a feeling that, okay, I'm not self-supporting person. So two of them, without these two helpers, I cannot really walk. So I cannot support myself in walking. Whereas the two helpers have a feeling that, okay, we can support ourselves in walking. So we are self-supporting entity. So there, this person, the sick person, saying that I am not self-supporting. Whereas if the person thinks that I'm self-supporting, that is very grossly erroneous. Whereas the two helpers, when they think that we are self-supporting entity pertaining to walking, so this is where the seeing the self as self-supporting, seeing the self as intrinsic real, comes in. So when we say that we investigate or we inquire into what is the object of imputation. So there, we need to say that the intrinsic self or the self-supporting self is being inquired, and even there, when you see the self-supporting entity or the self, if you look for this, okay, so this tashi, the self-supporting tashi, does it exist? And you pick that up and you try to look for whether it exists amidst meaning as one of the aggregates to be identified as one of the aggregates or different, then again that falls under the conventional analysis. This is not ultimate analysis. So now, what constitutes the ultimate analysis is that looking for this intrinsic self. If such a self, intrinsic, self-supporting self, if it does exist, it should then exist as intrinsically one with its aggregates, or as intrinsically different from its aggregates. Because if something exists, the basic rationality is that if something exists, it should be either one, or it should be more than one, or multiple. Likewise, if something exists as intrinsically, as something exists as self-supporting entity, it should be either intrinsically one with its parts or intrinsically different from its parts. So this should be the proper analysis, or the proper ultimate analysis pertaining to inquiry into the object of imputation. So here the object of imputation, which is the basis of the analysis, and what is being analyzed or what is being inquired. So these two should not be mixed, and all these the aggregates, different aggregates, they only form the basis of the inquiry, basis of the investigation, not the object to be investigated. The object to be investigated, it should be the intrinsic self, self-supporting self, or the truly the existent self. And how to conduct this inquiry. So that the mode of the inquiry is to inquire whether such an intrinsic or self-supporting self exists. So that should be done according to what Kidro Rinpoche in his composition, dispelling the perverted views. So there, what he said is that if something exists, just as when something exists, it should exist as one or multiple. Likewise, if something exists as intrinsically real, it should be intrinsically one or intrinsically different. And if something should be, so since that things cannot be intrinsically one or intrinsically different from its parts, therefore the intrinsic existence of the object, intrinsic nature of this self can be rejected. So for that matter, we need to reject each of one of them, that the self cannot possibly exist as intrinsically one with its parts or intrinsically different from its parts. So for that, it constitutes two parts, and the first one is rejecting the self to be intrinsically one with its parts. For that matter, it says that if the self does exist as intrinsically one with its parts, then the parts and the self should be one, identically one. And since opponents who accept the self to be, say, intrinsically one with its parts, they don't really accept, at the outset, they don't accept that the self and the parts, these two are one. But this is by the power of the reasoning that you push the opponent to have to, they have to accept it. So how that is done is by saying that if the two things are intrinsically, the self and its parts, these two are intrinsically one, which means that they should be truly one. If these two are truly one, then they should appear as one, just as the two appear as one to the sense consciousness or to the direct perceiver. They should also appear as one to the conceptual mind, because it should mean, if it is truly one, then truly has a connotation that it should be able to sustain its efficacy or the nature to all. Sometimes the person tells tells A, and other times the person tells the minus A or not A. Then it's not reliable, it's not true. So, likewise, if something is to be true, then whatever you utter to person A, person B, person C, all should be consistent. Likewise, that if the self and the aggregates, if you say intrinsically one, then how these two appear as the one to the direct perceivers should also appear as one to the conceptual mind, just as the two words should be when said, it should be whatever is said to person A should be said the same to the person B. Likewise, however, in whatever way the self and the aggregates appear to the direct perceivers should also appear in the same way to the conceptual mind. If that is the case, to the conceptual mind, if the self and its aggregates, if to appear as the same, these two should be identical one. This is the meaning of the two things to be identical one. So, because of which, that is how we reject it. And in the Madhyamika Avatar by Acharya Chandrakriti, there is the position that if you accept the self to be intrinsically one with its parts, just as the parts are multiple, the self should be multiple. Just as the self is one, the parts should be also one. So this contradiction is put forth against the advocate of the self to be intrinsically one with its parts. And whereas if one posits the self to be intrinsically different from its parts, then the contradictions indicated that these two become totally unrelated. The parts and the self, these two should become totally unrelated, because that the way and the manner in which the two appears different to the conceptual mind, it should likewise appear different to the direct perception. where you see two things simultaneously as different to the direct perception, these two should be unrelated things. So the self and your parts, the limbs, your arms and so forth, they should become unrelated. If that is the case, your limbs, there should be no difference between your limbs and somebody else's limbs. Your hands and somebody else's hands, they should be no different. Just as your limbs are totally unrelated, just as the others' limbs like arms, legs and so forth, they're totally unrelated to yours, to you. Your limbs also, they become totally unrelated to you. So these are the reasons that we need to reflect on. So in this connection, so as indicated here, reading the text, in the treatises, for the purpose of abbreviation, one finds more of the analysis done primarily on the ultimate level, whereas from the point of view of examining the object of imputation on the conventional level, it should be understood as being to merely analyze whether or not the parts of the chariot are indeed the chariots. This leads to the conclusion of the absence of the chariot. Okay, in this connection, and when such analysis is done, okay, so where, very simplistically, or where is the chariot, and then whether you dismantle the chariot with your hands or with your mentally, you dismantle it, then the chariot disappears, and then this people think that this is emptiness, and then when you put them together, assemble them together, then chariot comes. This is dependent origination. This is how many people explain it to refer to the compatibility or the harmony between dependent origination and emptiness, and yet this is not the correct understanding.
Nema Dorji and Dira left to subject object and then legend talk or solis are. Tini process the yalone, data on all the time. Then they know they made it Susi in the Hako was. They know they made the Sui in the Hako. Tito late Haber, Tony say a colleague copy, Torture Kabu Shibaji, Chili Haber was. Oti taro te kongal te poles te de la windows oti ta nyodra ngomata te to lauri chimbo to chuchuno te na lil hashures o cheta te tendro lil hashu korzot oya tato korzot tato te go to kar na Tenda, Ronji Trabato, Rochi Taba, what to go, Rochi Tabi Trashito, Ta, Wrong in the Traba, Ronji Traba, at the Navi picture, Marola Rochi Taba, Pentonto, Sally Yena Menami, Rochi Tabo, Hati Chandegra, Tetsu, Tikabayos, Tata Matrisoli, never recola. O te peton shitando. Man drisha de gola tantanda. Tan dini patre di chala patre lego nandro. Lasa maro sabgol mal to lego. Rosu chani tau mara. Ale cheta hamoko te inzini dene. O ti rosu matanko. Tito rapara. Pe tele tele ta ti jungo. Nebati inayo. Many journey under the dead to never took a large to Matomo Sayaga, Titi, Cordi, the Rapati Chibi. Neo need to come out in your own 2,000 what your own 2,000. Oh, teacher goes. Tiona, teacher tota, Tikabayo, Goli, Comoli, Testo Marase, the Cassie, the Tanga Mesodrome, Testo Carson. Ti ronji di trabato, sito de trabayuna, sito yoto, tito, yelati tato, ronji di trabato, sito joto, tadito, maso sito ta, tavikoto, demertona, sito, demertabitama poro to trabusa, oron, toto to trapsangoma, te tere, titsego, tatini te, 这是这다 제사 시코로라 마로 롱을 제는 단다 논투 시코로 따또 제집에 따또 코로 제지래 뭐도 자사래와 제지도 롱체가 말아 그저도 또또도 저 니샤 제지들 오늘 그저도 저도 때네 고토래도 공부도 납시래 뜻사 또또도 저도 단도 다 딜요 롱시기 잡아 데버 잡아도 롱시기 잡아서 데버 잡아이나 데버 잡아시도 다데 고로 콘디 시트 트럭 달라텐티 제바체 고르스 당에 메시로메로 같이 종샤 지바치도 띵고르도 고고 제바체서 아야 시트 트럭 배나 요나 시트 Yona Chito Tama Koroti Yogovano, Debatabana Yona, Roshi Trabayona, Chito Trabayona, Chito Tama Koroti Yogo. Tini Chito Tama Koroti Yona, Pomoto Chito Yona, Movi Dati Tacho, Mombo Jers, Pomoto Tadetema Chito and Wars, Tini Mo Chito, Tadetema Chito, Kotomba and Kilega Maris, Ribi Pegos. The Dembatraba was Dembatraba Chito, Dembatraba Chito Rena, more Chito, more Chito Dembatraba Rena, no such Gold, Topala no Sato, Mosala no such Chibarina, Deva call no Samadara when the Zambaran over. No such Chiba, you take only your metal to such Chiba. Kati yena thongsa chiba yena tene demba shesa chiba yena demba shesa chi zambare tene ko zambare no utino ye moi dadi tajo mombo yerse ato chiba yena demba chiba chita yena ta tate yena ngosa no she kumbo to ani danye ro demba chiba tate tene ro chi tongke ko kumba la ba Labato, Kumbalabani, and Nose Kitela, Susu Kumbalabato, Jeba Kumbalabato, Orosi Tabato, on the Chiba, Tati on the Tinoji Young, Tendimeba, what the Tinichi in Madrasa. Oh, yes, only she, Tina, Kazoto, Jeba. Somebody musician, team, 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 Tino yet the mother. Oh, yeah. Tito to Tonya, Mares, T. Team, Time Kurzola, team be Kurzola, Kurzo to Tiananas, Shitai, team member Kurzo to Chetano Yandona, Shitai Yalana also was Shita Yemet Tawa, Sola, Joma, Tada Toto to Tino, the Mayima, and Shita Yala to Shita Mabare. Gimet Tawa Jobber Jeremy she thought in a member called Javato. Then she thought me Ragamar, then she thought Mendus, Cassina look about she would. And then never and testimony told yes and Mumbai or the Moya. Say do what you call it, you got it. Tanda Chalanda and so. Dili pasti logo shi na de lapi shi na de shi do de kola tongso ra do tongni to ra che lapi du na de logo du na cha shi cha du na tende tomba tende shi tende nam jang ke mambo yuli sa tri sa mare aya Geshe aya Oh, cord, Jerry, she thought Never cover in Gerardo. Tin Lil Hashes, she, son, Amaran, Jercher, Lauri Chichonicano, Telele, there's a Cassie Conchali, and you got no Sarvat, Sombat, Tasnumos, the lad, Tene, da tabut, Nola, Kuzuto, Yover, Tesor, Chuzi. Kesa kuzoto yotato, tototo yotaka, kesa niyo yogeta dino, tina tinite wa, jitete satika, di loto no seba yora, loto cho seba tsegara. Tini hama konya, kesa, tini ronji ki me, yo se ka chi hiende no, kani lamde no mato, o tini kiba chame, datapo no la, ani, kuzoto, tototo, yoba, kesa, chu ni zing, chu, solen chu hama ko, tini pan zing, ani, chuzi shinde chi wan jong, te chuzi jong ne, tini, tototo yome cheli yes, and tini chevi kuzoto, ani, yala, shitaka, yala toto shitaram, yome tene, tinandro, tini shita me bachan. Toto tene shita to yala to roji traversito tate corono lo dune tino jebo tini tata niyo yani ani tindi shinde ni chiwa door no game body traversito chito gudya nishi tamba dawa gobalo lo pisha otele tate ne bidabdi daya por eso ya da Tant de tant longtemps dis donc quand j'ai dis donc longtemps des choses tu te dans le long de temps de non tenez que c'est pas non til tenez dans roji qui travaille ça dans pomba dans nga c'est un dans c'est un de on est tenez carrément suburban and then you down shoot out to down daughter wrong la koshi te wrong no bitum tatam go wrong to curse na dikje mato wala mako tanja ga wrong and toba la mako mato bala ko so toba la ro tila daji chawa no koje ngugo no jela rama lebe mo ronje te time ba no dambe ba rongo jite tilo danse go ya kar dame danse ne jite no kozala kongondo wasen o ti kozala koje kozala jite le ti ngaro to rore ta ti ngaro to saja ti ngal dago ngali ti dapo ngare ta se o ti 원샷 용케 티고 티 다고 요로 다 코로로 원샷 요티 어디 다고 티서 티쳐서는 세베 요로 잘라테 나 열보고 제도 다 쿨하로 소바 리스니바 티 다고 요 말에 마이바 티터 마이바 소소로 로이 소소고 잘라도 어디 다다 티 다다가 메이트 단다 로아가 메이트 이네 다음에 추타주 다음에 시야고 다도 다야가 그 다음에 이제 다음에 지금 당하로 시티에 되네 이네 가로 시티에 또 제서도 나 따통 로지티에 또 제서 니도 제서로 아니요 아니도 추지로네 아니 추진로디 콜에 칸이 로지티 잡아도 저 요바도 로지지 요바니 잡아요. 아니 때니 매바도 매 로지지 매바라 잡아요서 시에니 칸이 몸을 야도 또 같이 시에나요. seven, Senora, and then never could Ani Zetok, Tikani Mandu, and Tato Zetok Mandu, Tato Zay, Kozo, Toto Zetok, New, Tindo. You did tiny Zetok, Tato Zetok. Until Tato Zetok, Kozo Zetok, Toto Zetok, Dile Ticket Zetok, Chornit and Zini, and Tinanika Tama Zejet. Meba, Nika Meba, Yuba, Nika Yuba, what the Teninga and also so do. Unless they give you good of Tribber, Della Tenity, Maloya Poti Jorono. Those are changes of it beyond, they don't draw up a lot of the churches, the result of a stimming more and so.
Reading from the text, this leads to the conclusion of the absence of chariot. This is very clearly stated in both the extensive and abridged version of Lamrim to be the easiest thing to come to one's mind. It is for this reason that examining the object of imputation between the conventional and the ultimate level turns out to be a great source of confusion for people like me. So here the confusion is that while the failing to know that for this inquiry into the ultimate analysis is of two kinds, we just blend the two, or we mix the two up, and then gathering the erroneous, become erroneous pertaining to understand emptiness. So then, because the failing to see this distinction, then people make the people superficially or verbally, they make the difference, saying that things do exist, they don't exist intrinsically, things don't exist, things don't have things are not non-existent, but they do exist by dependence. So this distinction made, but in actuality they don't really see this distinction. They just mix up two things. When they reject the intrinsic self, they also reject the self. When they possess self, they also possess the intrinsic self. This confusion arises. Composed by Venerable Geshe Drakpa as a mere basis for one's reflection on 4th September 2021. And so this, this piece, the small piece, I translated. In summary, when we analyze the self, you call it self, the I, on that basis, we see that the self does not exist, have as intrinsic reality, or it does not have the selfhood. And so this rejection of the intrinsicality, saying that it does not have intrinsic self-supporting nature, this can be understood in the two ways. One, in ways that the self is dependent on the causes and conditions. That is very gross, and this is not what we are talking about here. This is not the connotation of the selflessness or the emptiness of intrinsicality, emptiness of the selfhood, the emptiness of the true existence. Whereas here it is the dependence, understanding of the emptiness of intrinsicality because of dependence on conceptual thoughts, how the self comes into being by dependence on the conceptual thoughts. And in this connection, when we speak about, say, the self, we speak about the selfhood of the everything, emptiness of the selfhood of everything. So this selfhood, this self-word actually comes from the person. So why we say that the self is the emptiness of selfhood of all phenomena, emptiness of selfhood applied to all phenomena. So it's saying that nothing exists with the selfhood, nothing exists as a self. So why this self is attached to self, or the selflessness attached to all phenomena, is for the reason that this self has a correlation with the person. That the person, when you think about the person, it has a connotation of some autonomy, that I have the freedom of the freedom. The self has a connotation of the freedom, and the selflessness has a connotation of no freedom. No freedom, dependent on others. So when we speak of the selflessness, is about the dependency on others, no, the existence through one's own freedom, one's own independence. So it's for this reason that we talk about the selflessness of all phenomena, indicating that all phenomena, none of the phenomena has the quality of the freedom, quality of independence. Everything is dependent originated. And going back to the point that when I speak about the self to be empty of intrinsic reality, so we are rejecting the intrinsicality to the self. In other words, the intrinsic self is rejected. When we reject it, this rejection is or to analyze, to inquire whether or not such intrinsic self exists, or inquire whether the object of imputation exists. So there are two ways of doing it, as we discussed earlier: conventional analysis and ultimate analysis. And failing to see this, the problem is that we tend to equate existence and the intrinsic existence, and we equate the non-existence versus the emptiness of intrinsicality. So then all the problems arise. No matter how much somebody utters, like 100,000 times, that the self is not the existence is not the same as the intrinsic existence. That non-existence is not the same as the non-existence of the intrinsic reality. No matter how much we say this, as long as we don't distinguish these two things, the inquiry into the object of imputation on the two levels, then the confusion is bound to be there. So with this in mind, we have concluded the teaching, and what I composed is composed as just the initial entry into the inquiry, into the analysis, into exploring the ultimate reality. With this, we stop here, and we will recite the verse which again we should recite it at the end as a dedication prayer. We'll recite it 3 times together. May all the virtues we gathered be of the greatest benefit for the Dharma and sentient beings. May the quintessence of the teachings of Venerable Lama Tsongkhapa Lobsang Tapa in particular proliferate forevermore. May all the virtues we gathered be of the greatest benefit for the Dharma and sentient beings. May the quintessence of the teachings of Venerable Lama Tsongkhapa Lobsang Tapa in particular proliferate forevermore. May all the virtues we gathered be of the greatest benefit for the Dharma and sentient beings. May the quintessence of the teachings of Venerable Lama Tsongkhapa Lobsang Tapa in particular proliferate forevermore. Okay, we'll recite with the end with the Heart Sutra prayer 3 times, Heart Sutra mantra 3 times. Deata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasam Gati Bodhisvaha Deata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasam Gati Bodhisvaha Tyata Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasam Gati Bodhisvaha. So with this teaching, may let us all pray that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the true source of joy and happiness on this earth, may he live long and that his wishes be fulfilled spontaneously. Also that all these great teachers, enlightened beings such as Venerable, the most Venerable Geshe Rinpoche, and all other teachers who are there to shine the light of the wisdom of emptiness and the unconditional love of the Bodhicitta, the most beautiful mind, Bodhicitta, and the fearless mind of the wisdom of emptiness thrive and take birth in the minds of all dear mothers and sentient beings. So the miseries of the world come to an end. Everybody feels the harmony and joy of the enlightenment. May the teaching of may the teaching of the Buddha Shakyamuni thrive in all the directions in the minds of all dear mothers and sentient beings. May all beings be happy. May all beings experience the nectar of the Buddha, the wisdom of emptiness, through the teachings of the Buddha Shakyamuni. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.